Howdy, this is Lemmy of RevZilla TV, here to talk to you today about driven axle block sliders. You should be looking into a set of driven axle block sliders if you want to throw some protection on your bike, as some insurance in case you happen to separate from your motorcycle while you're riding it and you want to protect the rear end of that motorcycle. These are available mainly for sport bikes. Use our bike finder, we're going to show you the ones that fit your bike specifically. Installation on these can get just a little bit hairy. I'm going to call it a 2-beard for most of you guys on our BSD, our beard scale of difficulty. I'll explain exactly what it's going to take to throw one of these on just a little bit, but you should know that you might have to elevate your bike up in the air, and a way to do that would be helpful. Let's get right into the axle block sliders themselves though. So Driven has cranked out axle block sliders, and for those of you who are new to the protection game, let me run you through the whole general idea of having a slider on your motorcycle. Once you are separated from your motorcycle, you're zipping down the road and you have gone off your motorcycle, the idea of things is to have your bike come down, not break anything on the way down as it actually gets the broadside onto the pavement, and then slide smoothly across the pavement until it does come to a stop, ideally not hitting anything and not flipping over, and also not grinding away any of the expensive bits and pieces on your motorcycle. Enter sliders. These bits of hard plastic are actually what are sliding against the road. And again, because plastic tends to be a self-lubricating item, the plastic is sort of a sacrificial piece, and hopefully it leaves your bike reasonably undamaged. That's the goal anywho. So Driven is helping sort of with their offering here, which is going to be the axle block slider. And this is going to cover the rear end of the motorcycle. So as the name implies, these axle block sliders actually go on your rear axle. The rear axle runs through them, and then these actually hang off the tail of the bike, protecting the swing arm and everything to the rear. Now the reason these are such a great way to protect the rear of your motorcycle is, unlike a spool slider that attaches on that little tab of metal that's on your swing arm, these actually use the entire axle itself to triangulate it. What that does is, in the event of a crash, it actually spreads the crash load through the swing arm and through the axle, helping use the rigid parts of the rear end in order to keep the bike safe. So rather than having just that little tab of metal that a spool slider might use that can rip off or possibly bend, these are actually going to distribute that crash load, give you a better chance of coming out of the accident without any type of structural damage to your motorcycle. So some of you might be saying, well, why am I going to consider these instead of an axle slider, just a plain old axle slider that runs through the axle of the motorcycle? It's a great question. On some bikes, these can position a little bit differently. Because the axle block sits off of the axle a little bit, it can give you a slightly different type of protection. But I think for most folks, they're going to opt to have an axle block slider as opposed to an axle slider, mainly because these things look awesome. Machined from 6061 T6 aluminum, you can see these things are absolutely fantastic looking. If you take a peek here, you can see the milling marks on here. Driven does a great job making these. They're just really good looking pieces. The machine work is top notch, and they're going to make your bike look significantly nicer than having just two plastic nubbins attached to your axle. That should be about all the excuse most of you are going to need to throw a set of these on your bike. Of course, the added crash protection doesn't hurt either. So let's get into installation. As I had mentioned, this is probably going to be a 2-bearder for most of you, but that can sort of depend. It's going to vary just a little bit. Depending on what kind of motorcycle you have, you may need to get the rear end of the motorcycle up in the air, but for some of you, you may not be able to use spools in order to do it. Some of you will have to wind up hanging the motorcycle, suspending it from an overhead member. Just keep that in mind. Now, that's not going to be true of all motorcycles. It's going to differ on a case-by-case basis, but other than that, once you clear that hurdle, should you have it, it really is going to be a fairly standard install. If you've ever removed and reinstalled your rear wheel, putting a set of these on should be pretty easy for you. Personally speaking, I don't have a track bike. I don't normally ride too aggressively, so I don't have a set of these on my sport bike. Having said that though, I would not hesitate to put a set on there if I did decide to take a trip to the track. Now, my opinion is not the only game in town. Click that info button, see what some riders who are already rocking a set of Driven axle block sliders in their bike have to say about them. If you need a little bit more help, something that I didn't cover in the video, get in touch with one of our gear geeks, 877-792-9455, or you can always get us by email, cs@revzilla.com. I'm Lemmy, I'm out of here.